Our guest speaker happens to come from a tiny community called Cedar Key. And before I introduce our speaker, I think that we all would like to just say that we offer our heartfelt condolences to Cedar Key for the tragedy that recently occurred there with the fire. I think Mike is going to be talking a bit about that, but what a struggle for that community, and what a wonderful community, and we know it'll come back stronger than ever. It was purely coincidental when we began our search for a guest speaker back in January of this year. The Michael Bobbitt's name was once again prominently featured in the local news. And it wasn't in the crime column, I can tell you that. I've known Michael for years, but in a whole different capacity. He was soon to embark on a promotional tour of his new book, God Save Cedar Key. And by the way, it's for sale over there. He will autograph it for you. I've already bought a copy. Thank you. Well, actually, my brother paid for it because I forgot my credit card. I bought a book. Many of you may have heard Michael's name or remember his name as a playwright, because he wrote Sunset Village, which was a very veiled stand-up of the village retirement community. Michael is a renowned playwright, a lifelong Florida resident, and the Clanbassador of Cedar Key, which was the title that my brother was very curious about because he never met a Clanbassador before, but he's been to Cedar Key. Michael is also a civic activist and is very, very active in Cedar Key itself, and he's going to share his experiences with us. We knew that Michael, as a guest speaker, would bring a tremendous perspective on living life to the fullest, which he does, with a sense of fun, a sense of humor, and a sense of purpose. And for that reason, Michael is a wonderful speaker for us. But when we invited him, we also were pleasantly surprised to learn that Michael knows the Alachua County Library System, and he's been to the Friends of the Library book sale apparently many times. And he's going to speak briefly about that. So, because I said, I'll give you a tour before the meeting, the annual meeting. And Mike said, oh no, I've been here many times. I know about the book sale. I said, whoa, good, thank you. Come back in a couple of weeks when we have our next one. So without further ado, I would like to offer a very warm welcome to Michael Bobbitt. Michael,
Thank you all so much. Before I begin my talk, I'll tell you that I know the Friends of the Library sale because about 22 years ago, I picked up a signed first edition copy of Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut for $1. People usually do a good job of squirreling away the expensive books and selling them in the rare book, but you missed this one, and it's in my collection now and always will be forever, and I love it. So hello, friends. My name is Michael Presley Bobbitt. I'm honored to be here with the Friends of the Library to share a talk that I'm calling Communities That Think, Finding Connection and Meeting the Digital Age. I think it's perfect to be giving this talk in a library, since libraries are both the practical implementation and the defining symbol of community. When I got out of the Navy in the winter of 1997, I came to Gainesville to visit friends for a weekend and somehow stayed the next 22 years. I had $17 in my wallet and a backpack with 3 changes of clothes to my name. I lived in an apartment inside what used to be the Presbyterian Student Center on University Avenue, right across from the campus, and I got to live there for free in exchange for mowing the grass, and I played the guitar at the Sunday service, and I helped cook the free Wednesday night spaghetti suppers. So when you throw in the free Hare Krishna lunch every day at the Rights Union, it was a pretty sweet gig. I used to come to this very library to use the computers and to check out the newspapers and the classified ads for my first job in town. And my first acting gig in Gainesville was in this very room with Joe Argenio's Fable Factory. I played the dashing young prince in Rumpelstiltskin. I think 27 years later, they probably cast me as Rumpelstiltskin. But the tie I have to this community and to this library, when you guys reached out to me and asked me to come speak, truly it's the high honor of my life to be here, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. So I just learned last week that Wikipedia has finally decided that I'm famous enough to include me in their online encyclopedia. That's not quite as big a deal as it sounds, because there's also Wikipedia pages for a ceramic cow on top of a light pole in Seattle, a lady with 3 arms, the chupacabra, and a famous ham and cheese sandwich. Still, it took 10 years for Wikipedia to approve my page, So I'm going to use the occasion of this speech to introduce myself in the most pretentious way possible via my Wikipedia entry. So here we go. Michael Presley Bobbitt, born February 3rd, 1976, is an American Southern playwright, novelist, commercial real estate appraiser, and co-founder of the Nitty Gritty Theater in Gainesville, Florida. He's a member of the Dramatists Guild. He lives in Cedar Key, Florida, where he's been featured in regional, national, and international press for his literary works, community activism in aquaculture and environmental education, and various stunts and achievements, including authoring a 10-minute monologue to a live goat, being flagged by the FAA for transporting questionable play props across state lines, shark's limbs to raise money for the Cedar Key School, the smallest public school in Florida, and riding out Cedar Key's Hurricane Idalia to protect and serve islanders who remained while releasing live weather video reports to national and international media. Bobbitt also serves as an official Cedar Key emissary dressed in character as the Clambassador. And I got to tell you, one of the great delights of my life is I got a call from Ron Cunningham from the Gainesville Sun, and he said, USOB, I've been a reporter for 50 years, and I've never been on the BBC, and I just saw your redneck self on the BBC. So eat your heart out, Ron Cunningham. But it's strange to see your life's work distilled down to a single paragraph like that. I grew up in a double-wide trailer in an orange grove in Central Florida. Not many Wikipedia pages come from the orange grove. If there weren't citations required for all of the claims in that paragraph, I wouldn't believe it myself. Because 10 years ago, I was floundering. I was a failed poet, and not just in the way that all poets are intrinsic failures. I also wrote really bad poems. I was a promising novelist that couldn't seem to finish a novel, a high-level golfer that wasn't quite good enough to play for a living. I had a graduate business degree that was no more useful than the certificate I got from the 2-week Florida A&M University course that certified me as a master goat breeder. I wish I was making this stuff up. And despite these credentials, I wasn't that good at business, and I lost more money as a goat farmer than if I just set $100 bills on fire every night for fun. But then I wrote a play to impress a girl, and everything changed forever. Not because the play was all that great, it wasn't. An overwrought sentimentality whose main character kills himself to chase after his dead son in the afterlife. And when he gets there, he meets God, who, apropos of nothing, is Burt Reynolds' Bandit from the 1977 theatrical masterpiece Smokey and the Bandit. The whole thing was kind of a mess, really. But everything changed in my life because of the group of people that came together to do whatever it took to bring my below-average play to life. What it took was forming the Nitty Gritty Theater Company, a collection of misfits and ne'er-do-wells who had nothing better to do than put on a play with a fake wild boar that gets carved up every night on stage, a play with a disjointed, meandering narrative leading to nowhere in particular, a play no other theater in town would touch, and rightfully so. So we found an abandoned building just off of Main Street and 6th. We got free paint from the county surplus, borrowed extension cords and church pews, and we rented everything else. And while looking back, I'm often embarrassed about this play, about the technical shortcomings of my first play. Somehow, through sheer force of will, it became a phenomenon in town. People just kept coming to see our makeshift little theater and a makeshift play from a makeshift theater company that refused to be denied. You can often hear us pretentious theater types uttering the cliche expression, the play's the thing, the play's the thing. But here's the thing. Sometimes it's not the thing at all. If John Lennon was right that life's what happens when you're making other plans, and I think he was, the magic happening at the Nitty Gritty Theater was happening despite our plans for the play. Despite the haphazard lighting design and the bare bones set, despite the crumbling building and the fake hog cut into pieces on the concrete floor masquerading as a stage, it was happening in the rows of church pews and borrowed chairs and folks sitting on the floor and standing in the back. The magic there and now here tonight is community, whether we understand it consciously or not. When we go to see a play, we're going to be a part of a community, to sit in a room with disparate people and hurt together, or feel humor or despair, to laugh and gasp and feel the deep mystic bonds that bind us together as a human family, even as the modern world seeks to pull us apart at every turn. I'm not the first one to think up this stuff. The Bible's New Testament tells us that where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there will I be with them. The Torah proclaims, "Behold, how good and pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity." In the Bhagavad Gita, we are repeatedly instructed about the importance of paying attention to others. The Sanskrit word for attention is chitta. Chitta is pure consciousness, not just being conscious of something, but being conscious of others in the community. And the only way that consciousness can exist is when it flows to other people. That's pretty heavy stuff, man. This is the part of the speech where a lesser orator would give you the Webster's definition of community. I would never stoop to such pedantic narrative devices, and since I'm here with the learned friends of the library, I'll give you the first two entries from the Oxford English Dictionary definition of community. 1, a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. That's pretty straightforward, and what I think most people think about when they hear the word community. Folks in the same place that do and like the same things. The magic, though, is in the second entry. A feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attributes, interests, and goals. Wow! Entry 1 is description. Entry 2 is a revelation, a feeling of fellowship with others. Fellowship is one of the most wonderful words in our language, and it's perfect as a cornerstone in the definition of community. But here's the real secret. The principal ingredient of living a happy life in community with others. We can only have true fellowship when we learn to care about something bigger than ourselves. 10 years ago, my community coalesced around the big ideas in my little play. That community solidified itself in the bonds that developed between us when we saw its impact on the audiences that just kept coming. In the mother whose son had died just weeks before, weeping in the arms of the actors at the meet and greet after the show, because she said she could feel his spirit in the room. The young man that had driven down from Atlanta to see the play, laughing hysterically at Burt Reynolds showing up in the story for no reason at all. In the group of hunters I talked into seeing the first play of their lives because I told them there'd be a wild boar in the story. I had failed to impress the girl I wrote the play for, but total strangers, one after the other, reported the various ways in which they could see themselves, their struggles and triumphs in the play. What a thing. All of us that had a hand in producing that play were changed forever by it, by the exchange of fellowship it created. The success of Across the River, that not very good play, inspired me to do the work required to write better plays. That success led to a bigger theater taking a chance on my next play, Trailer Park Elegy, which sold out its entire run. Theater is a tough business, friends. If you sell, on average, half the tickets, you're really doing something special. Selling all the tickets is a fantasy. I can still hear the local NPR radio announcer's voice in the 15-second ads we ran for that show. "There's a goat on stage! Elijah has a dark secret, and there's a dead lady on the shelf." On the opening night of the play, I came out to meet the audience afterwards, beaming with pride and overwhelmed by all the people crammed into the theater. A little old lady pushed her walker up to me. I said, "Thanks so much for coming. Did you enjoy the play?" To which she replied, "Sure, I guess. I don't really like plays. I came to see the goat. Can you bring the goat out so I can pet it?" I went and got the goat. The crowd went bananas. No one wanted to talk to me ever again. Years later, my ego would finally loosen its grip enough for me to realize that the live goat was as responsible for the play's success as my writing. And that's okay. It took a goat to get them in the door, and it was the goat they were talking about on their way home, but we were making and growing community all the same. The rest, as they say, is history. My history, at least. As you mentioned, my next play, Sunset Village, about the underground drug and sex culture at the Villages, the world's largest retirement community, premiered off-Broadway in New York City and became a runaway train of success. That play and its sequel, Return to Sunset Village, continues to be produced all over, years later. Seldom does a year go by, or even several months, where I'm not going somewhere to a red carpet premiere of this play that just won't die. I followed it up with a play called Florida Man, and that play took New York and then Florida by storm as well. It seemed, by any reasonable measure, that I was living a life in full, and I would just go on writing and being happy forever. But life was about to give me the advanced course in community that I didn't know I needed. The advanced course, as you might expect, was much harder. 5 years into the 10-year journey that would lead to my Wikipedia entry, things had been pretty rosy. I may not have impressed the girl I wrote the play for, but I had, through a quixotic feat of fast-talking, cheap charisma, and begging, talked her into marrying me. I crafted my entire ethos as a writer on the false notion that she had been my muse, that writing for her was as good a purpose for my life as anything else. This plan showed its critical flaw, however, when my muse, as muses are often wont to do, especially when they never asked to be a muse in the first place, packed up her things and my dog and drove away. I was utterly lost, adrift. I ate cereal in my underwear for a month. I was sure I would never write anything ever again. For a change of scenery, I began to spend nearly every weekend in the place that had always been my favorite getaway, the tiny island of Cedar Key, Florida. If you've never been to Cedar Key from here, you make a right on Archer Road and you just keep going until you hit the Gulf of Mexico. Cedar Key is a fishing village that's lost in time. The pace of life is slow and the fishing's good. It has the unique distinction of being the only coastal community in Florida where tourism is not our primary economic engine. It's aquaculture, clam and oyster farming by a comfortable margin. A few months of visiting weekends passed, and I got the idea that maybe I should just move to the island. What did I have to lose? So I drove out there, and on that day, I found a 140-year-old house that was falling in on itself. I made them an offer, and they accepted it. I spent the next 2 years renovating the old house, bringing it back to the splendor it deserved. As I worked on the house and myself, before I knew it, roots were going in and a new life was unfolding before me. I made best friends with the mayor, Heath Davis, a clam farmer, an obsessive, compulsive, clean freak weirdo that couldn't be more unlike me if we came from different planets. His mom and dad and sister took me in and treated me like family. I started clam farming too, so I could do what folks in Cedar Key do. In a few years' time, after sinking my clam boat 1 or 5 times, during the punishing learning curve of the new farmer, I had built a respectable clam farm. To help market my clams in the clam industry, I created a character called the Clambassador, which was basically just me dressed up in a velvet military coat with the clams on the lapel and a giant clam hat. Some filmmaker friends of mine helped me to make a short film about my adventures of starting a new life as a clam farmer. It was originally meant just to be an industry film, but the film turned out to be a compelling story about my friendship with Mayor Davis and about the incredible Cedar Key community. On a whim, we entered the film, Rise of the Clambassador, into the International Ocean Film Festival, and to our surprise, it won the damn thing. So I flew out to San Francisco to accept the award at a red carpet event. The film went on to win festivals around the world, so compelling a story it was about community. The world is hungry for community. You can view this film for free now on YouTube and Vimeo. I hope you'll check it out when you get home. It's only tangentially related to clam farming. Mostly it's an 8-minute story about the redemptive power of community. And as the Clambassador, I started a charity swim we do every year, a half-mile swim between 2 of our islands. We call it the Cedar Key Shark Swim, and we raise thousands of dollars every year for Cedar Key School, the smallest school in the state, and it's one of my favorite things I do. Come out next year, the middle of August every year, see if you can make a half-mile swim across the channel loaded with sharks to raise money for the school. We sure love to have it. The community of Cedar Key began to bind the open wounds of my heart, to quiet the hum of doubt and self-loathing that made it impossible to hear the call of writing again. After I finished renovating my island house, I found an enormous old houseboat floating in a back bayou of Cedar Key. These fellas had been using it for a crystal meth lab, but their operation turned sour when their lab blew up and it caught the boat on fire. I was able to buy the burned out old boat for a song, and I spent the next year renovating it. In early 2023, I sat down in the living room of the finished houseboat, realizing that I had undertaken its renovation slowly as an excuse to put off trying to write again for another year. And in short, I was ashamed. I opened my laptop and I closed it again 4 months later with the first draft of my first novel, Godspeed Cedar Key. When I wrote the last sentence, a meandering William Faulkner-inspired toast to the island that had saved me, I put my head in my hands and wept. Finally, a muse that would stay forever. Finally, a community worth working a lifetime for. Whatever talent I may or may not have as a writer, And I encourage you to make your own judgments by buying a copy of my book. Just after $15 for the paperback, $25 for the hard book. We'll take cash, check, all major credit cards, and IOU, whatever. We'll take it. But whatever talent I have as a writer was useless without a community to share it with, without Cedar Key, without all of you friends of the library, you perfect evangelists for the hope and power of community. A strange thing happened after writing the book. There's a scene in the book about a once-in-a-generation hurricane devastating the island. A short while later, weeks after I wrote it, Hurricane Idalia devastated the island in real life. Homes and businesses were destroyed. Island life was turned upside down, but not the island community. The island community came together to help everyone rebuild. A massive cleanup and restoration effort began, and within months, we were open for business again. You'll see some of the scenes here, just absolute, total devastation. Jim Cantore came out and got on my boat to report on the cleanup. Funny story about Jim. Jim knew about my fake weather broadcast I make for the Clambassador News Network. He's like, "Hey, Michael, I love your broadcast, but why are you always running me down? Why are you always saying things like Jim Cantore wouldn't be out here? He's in his hotel room." And I said, "Because you're Jim Cantore and I'm not." A really cool guy. This is Cedar Key showed up. Folks came from all over to help us. People would clean up their own yards and then head across the street to their neighbor's yard to see what they could do to help. It was community on garish, beautiful display. I had also written a scene about the mayor in the story getting his ear shot off in a near assassination. Recently, as you know, the former president of the United States, with whom our mayor likely wants no comparisons being made, was shot in the ear in a near assassination. When that happened, folks started stopping me in the street saying, "Hopefully there's no great fire in your book," so that we won't have one in real life. Sadly, as many of you know, we had such a fire a few days ago on Dock Street, with multiple businesses completely destroyed and our beloved restaurant Steamers badly, maybe irreparably damaged. I bring these coincidences up not to make light, but to give you even more examples of why community is so absolutely necessary for surviving the brutality of modern life. When the fire laid siege to Dock Street, our volunteer fire department met the fire head on. I was arriving back to shore from my clam farm with 250,000 baby clams on my boat. I saw one of our hero firemen, Jamie McCain, waving me over. I brought my boat over, and he was able to jump on the back of my boat full of clams and deploy a fire hose to fight the fire from the water side, while fire departments from multiple counties came to fight it from the other side. This is a picture here. These are down in the water here. You'll see firemen from Chiefland in the water, in the collapse zone, doing everything they can, putting their lives in danger to try to save this structure. This is fireman Jamie McCain, leaning on the back of my clam boat. This is me, the back of the USS Judy Elaine, trying what we can do to put this fire out. So after hours and hours of fighting the fire on both sides, we were able to get it contained. The entire kitchen area of Steamers is lost, but the bar and the rest of the building was saved. And notably, the rest of Dock Street, all old buildings with desiccated wood siding. Because we were able to meet the fire head on here, we were able to likely save all of Dock Street. This is what community looks like. This is an example of the work that all of you are doing here at the Friends of the Library. Because the community mobilized so quickly, the fire was contained. Because the community of Cedar Key mobilized so quickly in my own life, there's hope for me too, and for anyone that finds and cultivates a community like the one represented here by all of you wonderful people. In closing, I'd like to read you a very short passage from Godspeed Cedar Key. In this scene, many months have passed since an apocalyptic event that's left the island isolated and struggling to survive. The islanders have heard almost nothing from the outside world, and their daily lives have required relentless toil just to keep the Reaper at bay. This scene shows the first real living the islanders have done since the awful flash across the bay changed the world forever. The annual arrival of the white shrimp in the waters around Cedar Key has led to a community-wide picnic in the park. As late afternoon winded down, people began to trickle into the park. On an island known for year-round casual attire, and given the difficulties of life after the flash, it was striking to see so many of the folks arriving for the shrimp fry adorned in their Sunday best. Women were wearing makeup, and men had their hair combed or parted to the side. Without needing to be told, they had sensed the importance of the gathering and dressed in enough formality to mark the occasion as such. Luke and James Wilcox brought their guitars. Simone Beecham brought a hand drum and her bluesy, powerful voice. Jeff McLeod arrived with the colonel's mandolin and fortified calluses on his hands from weeks of near daily playing since his father had failed to return from the sky. Shrep hit the oil, Luke hit the opening riff of Country Roads, and a park full of Islanders sang along with John Denver and each other. It was, of course, a song about the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Shenandoah Valley, places that could hardly be more unlike Cedar Key. No one seemed to mind. Something about the moment would have been spoiled with lyrics about a blown-out flip-flop, stepping on a pop-top, or frozen concoctions to help them hang on. The McLeod mandolin hit a twangy lead-in lick, and the island chorus belted with abandon. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home, country roads. West Virginia was everything on their side of the number 4 channel. Their mountain mama was the Wakasasa Bay, and they were there in the park together, home. Hayes and Mark David fried pot after pot of the shrimp from Luke's kayak until it was empty. Bellies and hearts were full. The music continued into the night, and there was dancing. Dancing as fellowship. Dancing as a break in the monotony of toiling to survive. Dancing in defiance of a world set against them. Grizzled old clam farmers were laughing with Yankee transplants they would have spurned in the old world. Older and younger kids were swung on the park swings together. The petty feuds that seem to always simmer in small towns may not have been erased along with the smokestacks across the bay, but they were diminished as the night in the park went on. A big high tide made the little beach at the park's edge inviting enough that several kids and a few adults were night swimming. Now and then, rogue beams of moonlight would escape the sky's penitentiary of gray, shimmer across the water and onto the dancers on the beach. Luke played every song he knew and a few he didn't. The work to stay alive the past 100 days had left most islanders thin and ragged, but in the sporadic moonlight they continued to dance and play and swim. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for the work that gets done by the Friends of the Library, and thank you for spending this time with me tonight. Godspeed, friends.